Right, welcome back to Inclusive Design 24, brought to you in partnership with Barclays Access, the Baciello Group, Intopia, Microsoft Edge, and Open Access Technologies. Don't forget you can subscribe to Inclusive Design 24 on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 and hitting that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to follow ID24Conf on Twitter. And if you have any questions for the presenters, tweet them using the ID24 hashtag, and we'll ask them at the end of the session. And once again, we'd like to say hello to ID24U in Canberra, organised by the Canberra Web Accessibility and Design Meetup.
And our next talk is being presented by Damien Senger. They're talking about readability. Let's build great and inclusive experience. Damien, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me first. I'm really thrilled to be part of this event. And yeah, I'm even more thrilled by the fact that I'm talking about a topic I really love, which is readability. And just to present myself quite quickly, so I'm Damien Senger. I'm French and living in Amsterdam. Product designer during the day, accessibility advocate all day long, and a raccoon lover during the evening. So I have my own studio called Raccoon Studio because yes, I love raccoons, but I'm also working for a company called Castor EDC, and we're recruiting. So if you have any question and you're looking for front-end development job, just contact me. And yeah, we love accessibility. And because it's an event with people all around the globe, I wanted to show you a bit where I'm living at the moment. So UTC +2, it's 10 o'clock over there. And I'm living in Rotterdam now, working in Amsterdam, and it's really nice city. So I'm advising you to visit it if you have the occasion. And good to know, these talk slides are available on Noticed. I tried just before 10 and it was not published, but I think it will be published in the next minutes. You can just access with noti.st/hiwalo and you will just find the last one. And if you like this and you want to have this in the meetup, just contact me. So to discuss more about now readability. The first question for me was, why talking about readability? The first one is because we work mainly with a text-based medium, which is internet, on our computers. And when you work mainly on a text-based medium, readability is one of the most important things if you want to be sure that your content will be accessible for all the people who can see the content. And why am I talking about that? Especially me, because I'm a dyslexic person, and reading is definitely not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing, even if we have the impression that it is, because we learned how to read when we were like in school. It was like a long training, but once it's done, it's done. So it's something natural. You just take the text, you move your eyes on it, and you read. But it's definitely not something easy. Like a lot of mechanisms in your brain are working when you're trying to read a text. And readability, even if it's something who looks like something easy for you, readability is not only useful for people with reading disabilities, but for all the people around, because reading can be like, the experience of reading can be so different depending on the time of the day, depending on the situation, the location where you are. So readability is needed for everybody. And the reading issues can be linked to several different things. The first two are mainly linked to accessibility, like vision impairment. I really like the framework made by Microsoft, the framework on inclusive design, explaining that for each issue you have kind of three states. One which is the situational one which is the temporary one, and one which is the permanent one. In this case, for example, the vision impairment, you can have like the eye infection or the haze fever when it's, for example, the spring. And when you have like a lot of issue with pollen, most of the time your eyes are also impaired. Blindness, total or just partial, can also be like one of the most visible, in a way, vision impairment, but also visual distraction. And another part of the reading disabilities are the cognitive impairments. Like I said before, dyslexia or hyperlexia can be one. Autism and ADHD can be another one. A lot of time, by the way, dyslexia and ADHD can be linked together. But in the cognitive impairment, you also have something more temporary, for example, which is the fluency with a language. When you're not completely fluent with a language, it can be hard to read because you need more focus, more attention spent on the reading, or when you're in stressful context. When you're, for example, in an airport, trying to catch a flight, living in the next 35 minutes, it can be really more difficult for you to understand the information correctly. You need the text to be directly focused on the information that you're looking for. So these are also the kind of issues which can impact your ability to read. There is different type of reading disabilities aside of the cognitive versus visual impairments. The fact that, for example, dyslexia is not only one issue. Dyslexia can have several factors. One can be the language comprehension, but most of the time it's more linked to the phonological deficits, especially with kids, or the processing speed and accuracy, processes in your brain, especially with adult dyslexic people. Because yes, there is adult dyslexic people. It's part of all these kind of issues, especially cognitive issues, where we can see a lot of childhood diseases, like childhood issues, where we know that there is a lot of dyslexic child, there is a lot children, there is a lot of autistic kids, but most of the time we don't think about the fact that there is also adult people with this kind of disabilities. It's not disappearing when you start to be like when you grow. So to understand more how we can fix the readability of your websites, how do we read, which is a really important question. And in fact, the reading experience depends a lot of the context and the environment you're reading in. Why? Because you can see this yourself. If you're reading in a nice coffee places, on a couch, next to a small fireplace, it's just amazing. You're only doing this. But if you're like in a restaurant, having dinner alone with your small books during your vacation with a lot of people around, speaking, talking, shouting in a restaurant, it's not the same kind of environment. You will not be able to read War and Peace and all these kind of really big books because too much noise. But which is interesting is the fact that the reading experience really depends on the context, the environment, and yourself. Because what I just said can be completely different. For example, there is like studies showing that for ADHD people, it's sometimes easier to read in a context with a lot of noise, with a lot of activity around these people, more than in a really quiet atmosphere. And for example, in my case, with my ADHD, I don't like the peace and the quietness of my brain. It's freaking me out. So reading is definitely not the best things when there is nothing around. I need music, I need people, I need life. So reading depends on the context, the environment, and yourself. And most of all, reading is not linear. We are reading by saccade. So I will show you a bit how it works. So the idea is that we are not reading just word after word. We're reading with our eyes in a jump mode. We are jumping from letters to letters. And not just the next letters. It can be like 2 words after the first one. It can be just the letter after. Like it's completely irregular, but we are jumping. And these saccades are really important because they exist. They exist mainly because our eye is not something we can go on a line. Even if you're like following the horizon, in fact, if you have the impression that you are following like a line, it's not true for your eyes. Your eyes are turning all the time because it's a circular muscles. So reading is definitely not linear. And between each saccade, we have something called fixation. So we are not only just jumping, we are also focusing on specific items. Like when you are going on a sentence, you will jump from word to word or from some letters to other letters. But every time that you are like arriving on a new letter, you will not directly jump to the next one. You will first stop a bit, and this stop is called a fixation. And during a fixation, the idea is that everything except the focus start to be blurry. So you will focus so much on this specific point that everything else will lose quality. And because our brain use a lot of energy to do this saccades and fixation, and you have to imagine that when you're reading a text, there is a lot of saccades and fixation every second. Every few fixations, you need a small visual break. So a small visual break is the fact that you will go from your text, from a letter, you will jump to another letter, and from this letter, you will just go outside in the white part of the page or something else. Without moving your head, just your eye will quickly go somewhere, take some rest, and going back to the text. And these are the small breaks. So as you can see, saccades, fixation, breaks, nothing linear at all. And I have a text to explain this. So don't focus too much on the content of the text. I just took the first paragraph of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and I will show you, in fact, how the saccades and fixation works. So for example, in this one, we will start with a first saccade. So we started on the first W of Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so the first element of the sentence. And in most of the eye tracking that you can do, the first saccade will go at the end of the line. So first, you will analyze the paragraph. So first word, end of the line. And after this one, you will have a small fixation. You will go to another part of the paragraph. And like the first fixation will just be analyzing what you're currently watching. Not properly reading, just analyzing what you're currently watching. From there, and you can see that now, you will have small fixations really close one to the other. And in this situation, you start to read what is the content. Because most of the time, we're not reading in the word per word matter. So for example, here, like we were looking for something related to accessibility and W3C. So we have a small focus on the area next to accessibility, W3C, cooperation, and goal. Then it was a lot of effort. So we are taking a break with two small fixations completely in the white part of the paper, really far from the text. And once this break is done, we are going back to the text because we are looking for accessibility. And there is like small fixations on the word accessibility itself. Before going on the text, see if something else is interesting us, and going to see something else. So as you can see, this is definitely not linear. And you need to understand also that we are not reading a book the same way that we're reading on internet, because most of the studies show that when you are reading on internet, you're looking for a specific information. And when you're reading for a specific information, you're like analyzing text more than you're reading text. And with the big mess that you can see on the screen, with all the blue lines showing the different saccades and all the circles showing the different fixation, there is a lot of analyze, jump, and not really reading in a proper way, like word per word, like we learn in school. And to be able to analyze, a lot of us mainly use the shapes of the words when reading to identify the content, identify what, and identifying and understanding what are we currently reading. So the translation of this is we are definitely not reading in a word by word manner, especially on internet. And this has a lot of impact, and we will see this in the next part of the conference. And that's explain why you can probably read this pretty easily despite the misspellings. So I'm showing a text with this sentence. You can probably read this easily despite the misspellings with a lot of misspellings. And this is possible because we are not reading the word. We are identifying the shapes. And to identify these shapes, we are using something called letters identifying features. These features, it's what's allowing us to recognize the shape of a word. So these features are, for example, on the Y letter, the small bar, like the dissonant bar. On the T, the assonant one. On L, B, F, all these kind of letters, all the assonant bar going on the top. It can be the accent. For example, if you have an accent in French, most of the time it will be an E. So you can almost remove the complete letter just with the accent. 80% of the time, you know that it will be an E. So these identifying features enable us to read more easily. If I remove, as you can see on the slide, if I remove the first half, the top half of a letter, it can be pretty hard to read the text because you lose the context. Between a T, an H, an N, and an H, for example, it's almost impossible to recognize which one is which one because you lose the top part. But if I remove the bottom part, it's way more easily because if you can see a cross, it's a T. If you see an incomplete arc, it's an R. If you see two arc, it's an M. You can easily understand which letter is what. So identifying features, really important, especially the top part. So if you're doing some design and you want to do something like quite nice, to design something really stylish, always remove the bottom part of a font, never the top part. And this is the example. So there's the word readability on the screen and the readability in lowercase and in uppercase to show that the difference between both. In uppercase, you can see that it's just a big block. Everything's the same size, it's a big block. The only identifying features is like that at the end you have a Y, so it's a bit like a weird shape. But on the minuscule one, on the lowercase one, sorry, minuscule is French. On the lowercase one, it's a bit different because you can see the shape of the word. The shape thanks to what? The shape thanks to the R, to the D, to the B, to the I, and a B to the T, and the Y going on the bottom part. So you can identify with this 1, 2, 3, 4 jump on the top, 1 jump at the end bottom. You can clearly identify the shape of the word. And if you associate a context, it's even better because in a context, there is like a few words looking exactly like other words. And you can see this with this word. So I'm showing the word problem with one correct spelling, one like two small misspelling, but really small ones that you can probably read without an issue, and a last one which is completely messy, like PBLEORM. Completely different from problem, but the same letters. And we will see how it works with the different shapes. So problem, it's the regular shape. Problem, you can see that there's something similar. The only thing is that there is a small variation on the top. PB-leorm, it's a shape kind of similar to problem, but in completely different places for the top part. So this is why most of the time you can still read problem. Especially because if you like remove the small E issue, it's the same shape with a small difference, but it's the same shape. But not only the same shape, it's also the same syllabus system. In problem, you have two syllabus, pro-blem. In problem, you have also two syllabus. Same system, same way for both of the syllabus. For P-bleom, it's different. You have a P, you have ble, and orm. You have like a different number of syllables for your brain. The way you will analyze this text will be completely different. So that's why you can easily in a text understand the first one. If you're making the misspelling like the last one, it will be completely ununderstandable. So yeah, that's so I'm showing an images which is the result of an eye tracking made by Nielsen Norman Group with all the saccades and fixation. And as you can see, This is made on an internet article, and it's quite interesting because not only we are seeing the same thing as we were saying before on how do we read, but if you're like looking at the way people are reading, it's not only they're jumping to some of the information, but they're also not reading everything. Like half of the first paragraph is not at all object of fixation. Then the second paragraph, then the second block, the first paragraph is object of a lot of fixation, and the other paragraph in the second block are not at all objects of like focus of fixations. So you can see here, people are not reading word per word, except when they're looking for specific information. And this is possible because the shape of the word of a word or a form is one of the first things that we analyze. I'm saying a word or a form because, as you can see here, there is also a lot of fixation at the beginning, if you look at the numbers, just to understand how the paragraph is made. So the structure and the form, like the structure of the paragraph. And there is a small game for this. There's two spots in this image where with the same color. Which ones? Most of the time, you will need a bit of time to understand that the first blue one is the same as the last fourth one. Why do you need time? Because the first thing your eye will do most of the time, it's looking at the first one, looking at the last one, looking at the second one, and trying to find the information like this. Like if we try again with all the set of different balls with colors, you will find it, the blue one, more easily. Why? Because it's the first one and the last one. So we are looking at the shape of things. And when you have like consistency across the shape, like for example, blue and blue, it's more easy. It's easier for people to find the information. And proximity is also helping us. So when you have an information and you have information following, really important following this information, but it's just a side of it because it's where our brain will look for it. For example, in this last set of color, the blue one is next to the blue one. And it's pretty easy to find the second blue one in this case because it's just next to it. And outside of that, it's the Gestalt law. But the proximity one, it's easier like for our brain to find information when it's on the edges or just next to what we're currently looking at. So when we're taking all of these informations to readability on internet, it gave Readability 101. And most of the time, I like to think about the fact that we don't have to reinvent a lot for internet. In fact, it's not a new medium. It's a new medium, like now it was 20 years old, but it's something okay. With a lot of things we still need to invent, and we can still like change the shape of a lot of things on the internet. But we never have to, at least I think for the accessibility part, we don't have to think a lot about what we will need to create because most of the issues are already existing all around the globe and all around our life. And for readability on internet, it's the case. You can just like look at what Airport did. Airport is definitely the situation where you need readable information because it's a stressful context. Most of the time, people are not traveling every week. So it can be hard for them to understand information. They're not used to the system. There's a lot of noise. There is a lot of people. There is a lot of text. You need to go precisely at one specific moment on a specific part of the airport. You will have to go through the safety checkpoints. Like it's stressful. And you're going on vacation or just going back from your vacation. So you're not in the mindset that most of the time you will find the information easily. So they had to do a lot of work on readability. And we can reuse a lot of this work. And there is a rule for readability from Airport that I really like called the 4C of readability. And we will go through the 4 Cs. The first one is the rule of continuity. So it's the idea that we will repeat the information until the endpoint. So I'm showing a picture of an airport, like an hallway in an airport, with the same sign, exactly the same sign, repeated every 20 meters, with all the information. Why is it repeated? Because every 20 meters, there is new people coming in the hallway through different ways, from doors, from like the safety and all this kind of stuff. So in this case, you need to repeat the information. And not only you repeat the information until the endpoint, but you repeat the same information. It's the continuity. As you can see, M0, M1, M2, M3 are always written the same way, with the same name, with the same image. Keeping things from the beginning to the endpoint. With conspicuity, this is the second rule. So you need the information to be eye-catching, but also understandable. For example, airport needs like a lot of work on icons. And it's a lot of work because there is people from all around the globe. So for example, colors can be misinterpreted. Like you cannot always understood correctly the color, because in some culture around the globe, the color don't have the same meaning as in Europe. But also, like how do you say customs? How do you say like a meeting point? There is like now kind of an international system of icons. So everywhere in the world, you will find this information. But you need your information to be eye-catching and understandable. And most of the time, this image, for example, is a bad example because you have only icons in the image and no text. And in this case, you're not helping people to understand what is the content. I discussed this with a friend when I was preparing the conference, but the small luggage with Zol Douane written so small that you can just only see the round with the bar in the middle, is it really understandable as if you have something to declare, you need to go on this part? Not really sure. So conspicuity is really important. The third one is the rule of consistency. In an airport, for example, a gate is a gate. From the beginning to the end, you will go to the word gate. If you are looking to go to the baggage hall, it will not be sometimes baggage hall and some other time luggage hall. You need to stick to one wording. When you are like showing the path to restaurants, you will use the word restaurant from the beginning to the end. You will not use snack in between, because people don't care about the word itself. At one point when you're in the airport, you're not looking for gate, like I'm looking for G and A and T and E. No, you're looking for the shape of the word gate. And following the two first rules, you will see that gate is always written the same way. Like, for example, C18 that we can see on this picture, next to the icon of a flight leaving the airport, it's the same with the sign at the background. You will see a big C, the number, the word gate, and the same icon of a plane leaving the airport. So always being consistent, same wording, same icon, same way to write the information. And then the clarity, the message needs to be clearly understandable. For example, here, you adapt not the wording, but you adapt the way it's displayed on the screen. Here, for example, like you will see that the numbers are not the same size as the text. Arrival is smaller than 4. Why? Because people know that they need to go to arrival 4, so they will just look for 4. And Ankomst, the Dutch word for arrival, because most of the people in this country understand quite correctly English, like at least better than me as a French person, they don't need this information so much. So it's way smaller than arrivals. And for this 4C of readability, thanks Paul Meixenaar, which created like all the type system and all the icons and sign system from the Schiphol airport, which is a really good one. So readability and web content, and I definitely need to go quicker on my slides now. First thing, open dyslexia is definitely not a solution. It's a solution working quite nicely for kids during the learning, when they're learning to read, but it's less efficient to adults. There's a lot of studies showing that most of the time dyslexia with adults, open dyslexia, it's definitely not a solution as a font face on the website. So there is other solution. The first one is always include the most information point in the first two paragraphs. We've seen this before with the eye tracking. You will see that people were looking at the first paragraph of the first block, a bit the second paragraph, and that's it. They were going to the second block directly. And user heading hierarchy. Why? Because user can, in this case, navigate quickly where the content they're looking for is. But if you're using a good heading hierarchy where people are directly looking to the titles, if you don't have a summary of the page somewhere, for example, start the headings with the word carrying the most information, because it's where people will focus the attention on the first word of the title. So if you have a title talking about visas to go to Europe, start the title with visa, for example. And group small related content with a strong visual system. We will see this in the example at the end, but if you have a lot of different related content next to the other, find a way, like for example, a common background under all the elements, find a system so every item is related by a strong visual system. And bold important content. We're not bolding enough on internet. Using bold is important also for screen readers, but for the people who read directly on screen too, because it's the way we will analyze and scan a text. If you put the information, the important information in bold, you will be sure that most of the the fixation, will go directly on the bold contents. So when you have really important information, part of a sentence explaining that you need to ask the visa, for example, 2 months before, but asking for visa 2 months before in a bold way on your design. And avoid the use of too generic content. Be specific for links. This is tied to readability, but also with how to make websites for people with ADHD and screen readers too. Read more is not a good link. Explain what the link will do. It's also important for the readability because links most of the time have a specific color, some features like underline, and in this case, it's eye-catching. So you will focus more on this. Even if you don't want to, your brain will scan the text, see something blue with an underline, and go on it. So in this case, you need to be sure that it will not be read more, because your brain will be like, read more. Yeah, but I'm not sure what I'm looking at the moment. So read more what? So not only for screen readers, but for everything, read more is not a good link. So always be specific for the links. And be semantic and visual. Be semantic in the HTML. It's a really good thing, but also visually create the CSS for this. When you're making a list, the list needs to be visually displayed as a list. And also when you're doing definitions of word, we have HTML markup for definitions that nobody most of the time is using. You can do proper styling for the interface with this. And in this case, you can also improve the readability. So please be semantic and prepare the CSS to be matching the semantic of your HTML. And keeping a consistent layout is really important. There's a lot of studies on autism and how autistic people are reading. It's something absolutely not consistent because autism is a spectrum, but most of the time what we're discovering is the fact that consistent layouts are improving the readability of text. And also for all users, consistent layouts motivates us to read more when looking for an information. User can be really easily bored without a good visual hierarchy. Let's say that you have 3 different paragraphs. I'm showing 3 rectangles, each one is a paragraph. The first one will be read by most of the people. The second one, way less, like the blue bar are showing like the percentage of people reading the paragraph, and the third one, almost none. And this is what you were able to see also in the eye tracking before. You are always focusing most of the time you are focusing on the first part of the content to see if you will or not find information into it. So in this case, just remove information and keep a consistent layout, a good visual hierarchy. And if you have a lot of content, more than 2 paragraphs, there is a way to have a good visual hierarchy. It's adding titles. Because if you have titles, so I'm showing a graph, for example, here with rectangle as paragraph and lines as title, you will first read the first title, then go to the next title, see the third title, if everything is above the fold, for example, and going back to the title you were interested about and read the paragraph. And in this case, you also improve the readability, but you not only improve the readability, but the way people find information. And you make happier people, which is great. But if you start to add like some titles, paragraph, blah, 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 there's a question. F pattern, Z pattern, layer cake pattern, just a logical pattern. We are not reading with patterns. Patterns are, in fact, birthed by design. But we are not using specific patterns we're reading. It depends on what kind of information we're looking and how the design is made. So the only thing, propose distraction-free experiences. Don't do that. So this is a video of a website. It's a website to find some old vehicles that you can buy. And you cannot focus on searching for a vehicle. Why? Searching for a car. Why? Because there is car moving on the background nonstop. And taxis. Why taxis? Why in New York? It's a French website. But yeah, it's not a distraction-free interface. But this one is not better. It was Airbnb a few years ago, where you were going on the website, poof, someone was talking to you. So, hey, buddy, you look really friendly, but no, thank you. I was looking for an apartment in Berlin, not for someone helping me to get started and explaining me how they can host me. So not the distraction-free experience, especially if you have the fact that it was with the sound. So in an open space, the result is amazing. And please, you never know how much time is needed for someone to read a text, because we are not fluent in English, for example, because you can be distracted by a kid who wants to go on the toilet, for example. So don't change the text without asking the user first. When you have sliders, propose a way to stop the slider for the user. So that's the kind of things you can do to let your users the time they need to read. And the last but not the least, remove unneeded content. And once you remove unneeded content, cut by half the content that you kept, because it's still too much. So how to experiment this with your projects? Let's take a generic text. This text, it's a lorem ipsum kind of. First thing, it's adding more hierarchy. Visually, we need to see the titles. And once you see the titles, you also need more spacing. Always more spacing. And you can use eye tracking for this, but most of the time it's too expensive, so you can use move heat maps. And in this case, you can see where, because there is like a correlation between the mouse moves and the reading. So you can see where people are interested by content. And in this case, adapt the content. For example, here we wanted more focus on the first link in related information. After an update, you can see that we made a bit more like hierarchy into the information, and people were able to find information on the page with the F pattern. But people were not reading in an F pattern. It's with our design, we push this kind of pattern. And you can learn how to optimize the page. For example, this one, the information is not like that people, the information that people are looking for is not directly available. So in this case, you can, by seeing this, move an information to the top. And to end this, sorry, I was a bit speedy at the end, but to end this, like just some good example. The first one is a website made by Avocad a few years ago. Except the contrasts of the green, this is a readable and distraction limited design. And it's really nice because, as you can see, there is animations, but the animation are only for 1 or 2 seconds once you moved. I am moving the text, so it's not something forced to the user, but you can have the time to read something. There is a good hierarchy, visual hierarchy, so the information is easily discoverable. Next to that, Smashing Magazine. I love the Smashing Magazine redesign because I will show you the page. Even if you go quickly through the page, you can find the information. You can read the titles. You can see read more, but this is something else. But you can find the information quite easily and see what are the last articles. You can go and scan the content quite quickly. Big font size, using bold, perfect example. A French Vanity Fair, a French newspaper, the same. Like, we will go quickly through the page and you will see that there is a good grid and a good hierarchy. You can easily, even without knowing French, see culture, style, vanité, La valeur n'attend pas, vanité. You can see the titles even when you're like just scrolling quite quickly. Off screen, I'm really, 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 really sad because they just stopped. They just decided to stop and doing a break after the last issue, issue. So I'm a bit sad, but this website is also really nice because what I was saying before about grouping similar content with something consistent, it's the case here with, you can see this block of colors. It's the way to put similar things together, and it's highly readable. And the last one, almost the last one, sorry, to finish on an e-commerce one, to see that we can also do something for webshop. It's Hulu. It's a backpack, and you will see, except the fact that I don't really like the uppercase everywhere, you can read the titles. It's clear, it's readable. There is list. You can find the information quite quickly. There is never too much text. There is a lot of images. It's nice, clear, and readable. So this is typically the kind of design we could do in our projects because it's creative and readable. And the last one, it's this one. Even if I'm not sure of the contrast of the white on orange on the top, it's a website with animations, a lot of small animations, a lot of colors, like really playful curves, but it's working. It's highly readable. And if you see, the common thing between all these websites is the fact that, yes, they removed a lot of content. So I hope that you like this. It was a way to maybe make your websites more readable. And I hope that now you understand how your brain is reading. So merci beaucoup. Thank you. Tak, bedankt. I'm trying to tell you thank you in all the languages that I'm currently learning. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Damien. That was absolutely fantastic. Very interesting talk. Charles, do we have any questions on Twitter?
We have questions on Twitter. Again, so I'll start at the beginning. Mikhail Rudnitsky again. Are there examples where visual readability conflicts with screen reader readability?
Yes, I have examples, but most of the time, I would say that readability, not in the conference I can show, but most of the time I would say that readability is not the issue. In fact, it's the fact that people are not working enough on the screen reader side. So sometimes, like, to improve the readability with icons, for example, we are not caring enough about the fact that a lot of elements that we can add visually to help the readability will be also read to people with screen readers. And in this case, for me, it's mainly because we are not spending enough time to hide elements from screen readers or to provide with ARIA, for example, some alternative content from screen readers that we have an issue. But most of the time, if you're like cutting the content and going just to the essential parts, all the visual improvements will be visual, so not read to screen readers, especially if you use ARIA hidden and all this kind of information, or just hidden now for icons, for example, small icons without really content value. So most of the time, it will not be an issue. So if there is an issue, it's more because we did not spend enough time on the front-end side.
So it's not a fundamental conflict. There are other areas where there are fundamental conflicts, but this is just, you need to make sure you get both of them right, and then you can do that.
Yeah, most of the time it's even the opposite. So you're more going together, because when you're adding more hierarchy in the page, in fact, it's helping screen readers, because when you're using the web rotor, you can go from heading to heading, like, so it's helping. So if you're really like focusing on the readability, removing content, adding bold, it's helping, not an issue.
And then there are two questions that one is just, do you have sources for the information presented? Do you have a...
Yes, I can add it to the notice page that I've put at the beginning. There is a really wonderful study with a lot of eye tracking made by the Norman Nielsen group. And if you're really interested by this, it's one of the less expensive one from the NNG, because it must be something like 40 euro. So it's like more than 100 pages of recording of eye tracking and recommendation. So this one is quite amazing. And aside of this, yes, psychology lessons and some books. I can add everything into the resource section on Noticed for the people interested. And
in particular, Ariel Fox said, do you have good resources to convince your boss to cut content? Convince everybody's boss to cut content.
Yes, the first one is just go on the page, do a 5-second test. It's a UX test which costs almost nothing, but it's the best way to show to your boss, for me, that you cannot have too much content, because we have like a lot of studies showing that, especially in e-commerce, we are not spending more than a few seconds on every website. So if people cannot directly find information, there is an issue. And if you're doing a 5-second test with a lot of content, and you just like show the difference with a page with just the content going to the minimum, like to the essential, you will see that in this case, in 5 seconds, people can find the information. They can at least find where to find information. And it's an issue I had at Fairphone, in a way, my previous job, that I showed the heat map, because Fairphone is a company with a lot of story. They're building an ethical smartphone, and ethical smartphone, it's like a lot of things to sell. You have a lot of things to say. When you're like explaining just why the battery are not available right now, for example, it's so complicated. There is so much thing to explain that it was always a debate on what to say. But what the heat map showed us is the fact that more we were saying, less people were reading. And more people were impatient, because in the information, it was not only the information on why is it unavailable, but when it will be available again. And because it was way too much information, people were not going to this information, and they were complaining on customer support because, oh la la, you're not giving us the information on where the battery will be available again. But the information is available. You're just not reading it because there's too much content.
Right, it gets buried.
Yes.
Oh, excellent stuff.
Thank you.
I was going to put my neck on the line and ask you a 2-second opinion on the ID24 website, because I know myself that it's extremely text heavy. So just wanted a quick yes or no. Did you find it absolutely horrible, or was it okay?
It's complicated. I think it's complicated is my favorite answer ever. It's complicated because I love the yellow on black or black on yellow. Black on yellow is used by airport because it's the most contrasted thing your eye can read. So it's even more readable than black on white, because our eyes like when it's a bit yellowish on the background. So in a way, the top part is really readable, and the rest is also readable because white on black, it's like also restful for your eyes. But having a big white block next to the text, it's just the best way to say fuck you to your brain, and your brain will just go to the tweets and not read the content, because you have like the white block craving all the attention and a lot of text aside to it, saying, hey, I'm existing too. So it's a nice one. It's readable. It's just like more white space and this white block. Why?
Yeah, I think that's on our hit list. But no, thank you very much once again for the absolutely stunning presentation.
Thank you.
And now for the audience at home, if you like this session, hit that like button, and don't forget you can subscribe to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 to get notified of any future events and videos. A reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you in partnership with Barclays Access, the Paciello Group, Intopia, Microsoft Edge, and Open Access Technologies, and with thanks to our sponsors, DQ Systems. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour, and this time we're going to have Ariel Fox, and I had it right here. They will be presenting about the diverse representations in design and awkward conversations with colleagues. So hopefully you'll join us then. Thank you very much.